DCarsonCPA, MFC in the lines. It's a simple whiteboard talking about some sort of element. Always when we present this, it's a sketchboard, a mind map to an area we want to cover with you and areas where we can help. This is a simple local model of governance and financials corresponding to a municipality or your local government. A broad line to talk about some of the points, and there's much more held in reserve, but it's an introduction. It's the first time we've approached this segment in a whiteboard, so we'll be talking about it a little bit, and it'll get better with time. This is just a leading presentation, and we'll allow ourselves to refine, to improve, and get the message out. We look at this from a perspective of economic, statistical, legal, financial, technology, and societal research. That's in the human capital line, societal research. And we think about government as an X-factor entity, because if you looked at the industry lines, you're thinking about making a profit. In the governmental lines, you're looking about managing money efficiently, but you're also thinking about an X-factor societal benefit, meaning that a government can place rules in place that are designed to protect, to educate children, to protect people, and to do lots of community services. And that's an X-factor value where it's societal improvement. It's hard to measure that in the straight financial terms. You have to do it for actuarial science, for mortality tables, for insurance and stuff. But in reality, there's always an X-factor value, because I think people are exceptional. The members of your community, the men, the women, the children, their potential and their potential to work with government in productive ways and to come up with good things is very important. Government supports, of course, the lines of industry, local industry. Local and municipal governments may have favorable or disfavorable business policies, and that may be based on it's driven by the community interest. Is it a residential community or a mixed-use community, or is it a commercial community? Depending upon the priority that communities place on jobs, there will be a priority placed on industry. And so the favorable business policies will increase industry in your locality. The disfavorable policies will have the inverse effect. It deals with the function of taxation, function of local ordinances, function of public and private roads and how you govern them and who you permit. If you, for instance, ban commercial traffic, okay, that's going to cut down on the 4 business lines, make it more difficult. Those are just examples to talk about different elements of policy that may impact. All right, we'll think about the community lines in relation to the local government, to the municipality. Long ago or recently, you probably had some articles of governance set up, and those are lines that are incorporating your town or your village, and basically setting up a point where there's a legal reporting structure. It would define you're gonna have a mayor or a town leader. You're going to have a town council, and you may have a judicial branch. We're talking about one of the size sufficiently to have all 3 points to have a fully functioning local government, but you may also have elements of that or some different structure, and that's fine too. This is just a model that's geared to at least a balanced structure there. Now, when we look at these lines, we think about it. There's the responsibility of a locality to the state and federal lines. So remember that your entity lines here are accountable to state and federal lines, and then you have the lines that, of course, they're accountable more directly to the individual stakeholders here, and those stakeholders will continue to interact with the government with lines of ongoing voting and ballots and initiatives. And those ongoing ballots and initiatives are ways to communicate with the delegated representatives, the elected representatives of the town leadership, town council, and town judiciary division. Now, when you think about all the things that need to happen here, all the things that government supports, you might have a library, a fire department, police department. You're going to have your court clerk is going to have town records and property records. You're going to have different lines, laws, and rules and codes for the buildings and all that set up by the legislature and then delegated to the town leader to take care of, or the mayor or whomever may be sitting in that seat. You're going to think about different lines. And the first line, taxation, will be in everyone's mind. Taxation is about real property and potentially income and services taxes, which will be used to support these services from here. Typically, you have a community. They contribute value in terms of dollars to local government. Local government, in return, provides services. That's the line of start for the function of the local government. And the local government would have, in addition to taxation, they're going to have health and human service, so let's say elderly services or social services. You're going to have pensions for the employees that work in the town. You're going to have governance and codes for the roads, for the building, for the electricity, for all sorts of things that'll come from the legal lines. And then you're going to have some other lines which will include the environment. They're going to include trade and commerce. We spoke about that a bit. Education and education policy. You may have people who are educated in your town school system or in your region. There may be a regional high school where everyone goes to. Lots of different structures, but all that is relevant to some capacity of what you do in the town and municipal lines. as you look at the town and municipal lines, the common lines of operating the governance structure and making sure you can get things done are going to be working with financials, with technology, and with human capital. That relationship is consistent across industry, NGO, nonprofits, and government lines. Those are basic lines where you have financials at work to help you allocate resources and to acquire and collect resources, and to point them out to the points where services are being delivered and to properly fund those so you can have people in place, vehicles, whatever you need to do that. Then back on the X factor value line, there's something that's really important. Government supports community needs as a community delegation of certain needs that are better supported by a common ground where there's consensus. So in other words, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones cannot specifically say, I don't like this, and just arbitrarily make a rule. No, you have to get the consensus of the group. The consensus of the group goes into government, and then you have a more mainline representation of government. So ideally you have a healthy, well-functioning, balanced government here. You've got a comptroller who's probably running financials. You should have an auditor. At a minimum, you will have a public accountant who cross-verifies your financials, issues an opinion on them, and tests on a limited basis to a reasonable degree that the factual accuracy and correctness of those financials. But remember that an audit is sample-based. It's not perfect, it's not 100%. It looks at a representative sample of the financials, and there's much more in the specific details. So if you're ever looking at audit financials of a municipality, make sure to read what is and what is not an audit, because we're not fully defining it here, but it's something to make sure that you know proper procedures were followed, and those could be procedures for, it depends where it's being audited from, so there's different procedures, but certainly there's a set of rules. You should understand those and what they mean. On the lines of finance, for the fiscal and budgeting need, you can have the line of taxation, which is the funding line, real estate, services, and property taxes, and potentially income taxes, which are bringing money into the government lines. Then you can have the expenditure lines for appropriations and services, for legal judgment, for all sorts of different things which happen within government. And those are the primary two lines. So if you looked at an equation, you've got tax revenues equals expenditures plus debt service plus interest equals your surplus plus or deficit for the local lines. Now we say debt service because if there is a gap in tax revenues, perhaps one year the economy is really hurting, you scaled back money in government level, what happened was you had a deficit, you had to issue some bonds, some municipal bonds went out to the market. Municipal bonds went out to the market, meant there's now a debt plus interest cost to repay, and that will increase your town fiscal structure, and it will decrease the ability of resources to meet current needs because they have to be spread out across other bases. So you have government here. Government supports many needs. This is a township or a local village, and basically it's a quick model. The stakeholders are industry. NGOs provide some guidance but are not really as much involved at this level. Nonprofits are here because they have sports, religion, different services, and they support societal needs. So this is around 360, looking at a local or